able to achieve our plan of eliminating load reduction. So I want to start here. I did make the point previously that we are going to ensure that we address the multiple manifestations of the energy deficit, the electricity deficit in the country. The preeminent one was on the aggregate side when we failed to aggregate generation, could not meet the aggregate demand, resulting in bouts of load shedding. And as we have reported previously, is that we have turned the corner. We are not about to turn the corner, we have turned the corner on the resolution of load shedding. And I said to the country that I'll be the first one to stand before the nation and state boldly that we have ended load shedding. And that before that time comes, I want to say that we are doing everything possible to eliminate it. So you can see that we are achieving exceptional results at the height of load shedding in 2023 early, around February, March. We had the energy availability factor, that is the performance of the generation fleet, was sitting at about 48%. And now as I speak to you, we're consistently above 70%. And I'm confident that we'll continue to push that number up, and hence you see that the lights remain on. The second challenge that is confronting us is the one on the cost of electricity. I've stood here before the country and gave you the assurance that we're working on the resolution on the cost of electricity. From 2007 to 2024, last year, electricity has increased by 937%, compared to an inflation over the same period that has increased by about 155%. So you can see that it's eroding the disposable income of many households. It's not just affecting the poor, of course, it's affecting the poor disproportionately, but the middle class, even the high income earners, are finding it exceptionally difficult to afford the cost of electricity. And of course, it manifests itself in the South African economy, making our goods not competitive on the market. So we're doing everything to resolve that. I give you this assurance that we're going to resolve that. I'll come back to you. And then the third manifestation of the electricity deficit was in relation to load reduction. I did explain previously that load reduction is a downstream isolated infrastructure deficits that relates to both the reticulation and the distribution infrastructure, resulting in a localized community not having access to electricity during peak periods. Those peak periods in the morning and in the afternoon. And I'd made the point that it is immaterial to these communities, whether you call it load reduction or you call it load shedding. What is common is that there are periods in the day where they don't have electricity. But also what is more worrying about load reduction, it's got an appearance of discrimination on an income basis. So essentially you will see when I map the prevalence of load reduction in the country, the density or the concentration of load reduction is in poor areas. And it gives an impression that we are penalizing the poor, those who can afford, and of course those who are affluent, the rich, who have a voice, are let scot-free. And it's something that we're soiling our message in relation to the efforts we're making to ensure that we're able to provide electricity to everyone on a continuous, uninterrupted basis, 24/7, 365 days a year. So now today I'm announcing we're ending load reduction. So I repeat, we're ending load reduction. The period we have set ourselves is anything between 12 to 18 months, but it can be exceptionally shorter than that. And I'll explain to you why that 18 months period, because it's a function of how we get to be received by communities. And I'll tell you how we're going to address that situation. So I want to say to the country, we will end load reduction if there's absolute cooperation by communities. We'll end it in the next 12 months. And in areas where we experience resistance, we'll invest time and effort to engage with everyone. And in that instance, then we might push it further by another 6 months. But I want to say to the country that we are going to end load reduction in the next 12 months. Once we get that cooperation, there are parts of the country where we are confident we'll get that cooperation. There are parts of the country where we know it's going to be difficult. And I'll share with you what the features of the areas of difficulty, or if you like, intransigence. But I thought I must say the following, just to situate the conversation. There's 1.69 million customers. So I'm talking about customers. So if you had to translate this to number of people, assuming that an average size of a household is about 5 people. So you could be talking about, if you like, 8.5 million people that are affected by load reduction. So every day when they wake up, they don't have access to electricity. When they come back from work in the evening, there's about 3 to 4 hours where they don't have access to electricity. It's a major disruption to their lived experiences. And the total number of transformer failures is about 771. And I must say that a large part of this has to do with illegal connections. And that's why I'm saying that as part of this effort, we are going to regularize people. So we are going to go into an area, typically an informal area, assuming that the municipality has formalized that, we will roll out the infrastructure so that everyone has got access to electricity that is legally procured. So part of the resistance I was referring to, we know that there are those who are profiting from this illegal connection. So some of them are delinquent employees of ESCOM and municipalities that are connecting people illegally, and we know they are going to agitate those communities to resist our presence there, because we are taking an illegally earned income that they've accumulated over time at the detriment of the users, the consumers in the area. What is the impact of this? And then there's issues of vandalism. So part of the effort that we'll be making is to refurbish and maintain the distribution and reticulation infrastructure. So we're going to roll it out ourselves to ensure that we're able to address this situation. And we know that once you resolve the issues of illegal connections and ensure that those who can afford to pay will be able to pay, and those that are indigent, that qualify for free basic electricity, do get that electricity, we are going to ensure that the ESCOM is able to recoup its income, and municipalities are able to recoup their income. And maybe the qualification I need to make, the 1.69 million customers are the ones on the ESCOM database. I'm working with municipalities to determine what are those that are subjected to load reduction, that are supplied to by municipalities. And that number will come, and then I'll update the presentation here. But the timeline still remains the same. The aggressive nature of the rollout will still remain the same. So we know that this has got both the social, economic, and financial and safety risks. Safety risk is that when there are illegal connections, you have wires that are exposed. We know of instances where kids have been electrocuted as a result of wires that are being exposed when people connect illegally. It's got social manifestations in that kids preparing for exams, they want to write homeworks, they come back home, there is no electricity. When in fact those who are in areas where they are affluent, they can go onto online, do their research, the lights are on, they can do their own homework, they study better under relatively better circumstances, and that has got an impact on the prospects of their academic progress. So those are the social manifestations I'm talking about. It's got economic manifestations because there are small businesses in townships, in informal areas that rely on the availability of uninterrupted electricity. When in the morning they want to prepare magwenya, as an example, as a business, the lights are off. And then also in the evening, the lights are off. So it just constrains the ability of township businesses to thrive, this issue of load reduction. So we want to end it once and for all. One of the issues that we will be doing So the first thing is the rollout of smart meters. So I want to make sure that everyone, when you go into a community, is on a smart meter platform. One of the biggest criticisms I get, and these are valid criticisms, when I go into a community, they tell me that, Minister Ramokgopa, I pay for my electricity, I'm not illegally connected, I'm consuming that which is allocated to me, and yet I'm subjected to load reduction. And I know it is the neighbors or an adjacent settlement that is connecting illegally. Why is it that you are also punishing me? So with the rollout of smart meters, what that allows us to do is that if there are those who continue to be delinquent, by delinquency in this instance, I mean those that have the means, can afford, and they choose not to pay, we are able to isolate that customer alone and not make the rest of the customers who are connected to the same transformer collateral damage. So it gives us a technical agility for us to be able to roll out, to be able to isolate those who choose not to pay. The second thing about the smart meters is the following, is that there's about 2.1 million customers on the ESCOM side that qualified for free basic electricity. But of these 2.1 million customers, only 485,000 are getting this free basic electricity. And yet, National Treasury is given to allocating this to municipality, to ESCOM, to be able to ensure that the poor get free access to free basic electricity. Once we have rolled out smart meters, what that allows us to do, we'll be able to front load that allocation for free basic electricity for a household that qualifies to get that free basic electricity. So we're taking the money to the people, to the customer, where it belongs. That's what we are going to do. For that to succeed, we need municipalities to work with us to generate a robust and credible indigent register. So there's a framework against which we are able to evaluate someone's eligibility for free basic services. That's not done by ESCOM, it is done at the municipal level. So we need to work with municipalities, and in some instances, municipalities don't have that capability. It's something that we are going to build over time. But for us to end load reduction, you don't necessarily have to have the indigent register in place. You need the indigent register to be in place for us to be able to extend the free basic service going to those that they are affected by this. And as a result of this rollout, we'll be able to achieve universal access. So when we say load shedding is behind us, we mean that there should not be load reduction, and we're not going to discriminate anyone. And then one of the things that we're doing as a department is to review the free basic electricity framework. Of course, as we know now, the law says we have committed policy 50 kilowatt hour per month. We have done our own studies, and those studies are born out of evidence. ESCOM is the biggest utility, and of course municipalities 45%, they account for 45% of reticulation. We know that an average low-income household consume about 200 kilowatt hour of electricity per month. So if we talk about 100% subsidization of the poor, it means that 50 kilowatt hour should be at 200. But for you to shift it at 200, money must come from somewhere. So we're going to change this framework without necessarily relying on the fiscal envelope. So we don't want to go to Minister Godongwana to help us with additional money, to have an additional 150 kilowatt hour given to the poor. We think that there are technology advances that can help us to do that. The microgrids, both solar PV and battery, or a combination of that can help us to bring down this cost of electricity, and therefore, by definition, we'll be able to give more to those who qualify. We'll come back with regards to the revision of that and how we are going to finance it. But the point I'm making is that we know that an average low-income household consume far more than the 50 kilowatt hour they consume now, about 200 kilowatt hour, because really society has evolved. You'll find even in low-income households, they've got cell phones, they are going to charge these cell phones, it consumes electricity. When we conceived of this 50 kilowatt hour, this policy, you never had the penetration of cell phones as we have them today. low-income households in some instances, like here in Gauteng, very progressive policies. They have gadgets that they can take home to study. They need to connect those, and that's why you see the levels of consumption have gone up. Even a low-income household have got a TV installed. When these things were conceived, you never had these things in place as a result of some degree of social and economic progression. And that's why that revision is important, and that's why we have to answer the question how it will be financed. And we think that we will not tamper with the resource envelope. Our view is that we will not go for more money because the state can afford it. The answer is in new technologies. And then the other point I want to make is that when I have conversations with, sometimes I do media interviews and the like, and of course other voices in the space, they say, no, this load reduction comes about because Eskom is not truthful. It's having problems with regards to generation, and therefore they are penalizing the poor so that they can bring down demand. I thought that I must just share with you that, if you look at the demand on a day like this, about peak demand will be about 26,000 megawatts. We are generating substantially more than that. And as a result of load reduction, what the amount of unsaved energy is 529 megawatts. So there is no relationship between our generation capacity and load reduction. We can be able to provide for everyone. So the issue is not that. The issue is because of a constrained environment. And then there are 3 provinces in the country that accounts for over close to 80% of load reduction. 21% of let me start this way, 38% of the total amount of load reduction in this country is in Gauteng. And this is found in the informal settlement. As a result of growth, proliferation, informality, and the inability of municipality to keep up with the demand for electricity infrastructure expansion, you find that there's increased illegal connection. And like I said, the informal settlements. And then what do Eskom and the municipalities do? To protect that infrastructure, they initiate the load reduction. So if you like, the center of gravity of this load reduction is in Gauteng, then followed by Limpopo. So we've seen that there are villages after village in Limpopo where there's load reduction. And I'll show you the numbers, where these towns are, where these municipalities are, and then we've gone down to the level of a ward. And I'll tell you, when are we going to start? When do we expect to end? Of course, I do qualify that, is that going into that space is a function of how you are received by communities. We know, for an example, that highly likely, when we go to the more rural areas, the level of cohesion and discipline is relatively higher than the township. What do I mean by that? The entry point in the rural villages, we go through the chiefs. And then there's an orderly way in which we engage with communities. When you come to the more urban, peri-urban settlements, informality, you've got voices that are profiting out of illegal connection. And they are the ones who are likely going to stop us from engaging communities so that we are able to roll out this infrastructure. So we're expecting the greatest resistance in the more urban areas and a relatively free access in the more rural areas. And I want to emphasize to communities, when you come into your community, we have communicated with you through the ward council. We are coming on this day, we are going to map out the infrastructure rollout. When are we starting? When are we ending? So that we have electricity. If there's resistance after multiple engagement, we retreat from that area, we go to the next suburb. And then you'll join the queue from the back. So that's the point that we'll be registering to communities. Of course, when we engage, is a dynamic nature of engagement. Areas of disagreements, will resolve them in a respectful manner, engaging manner, and then where we are received, and there are communities that are calling Eskom and the minister to say we are ready, we'll go into that space and address that. We will not place that requirement of pay so much before we come in. There was a 500 rands requirements. We'll just go into an area and we address load reduction once and for all. And we hope that communities will receive us. The next province that is most affected is in Mpumalanga. When I engage with the mayors there, I can see the level of proliferation of load reduction. And then the last one of the four is KZN. It's sitting at 18% of the total load reduction is located in KZN. And the rest really are, in the context of the totality of load reduction, is not that significant, the remainder of the provinces. So our ambition is that those provinces outside Gauteng, Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and KZN, we are confident that in the next 8 to 12 months we would have eliminated load reduction, because in both absolute number and percentage-wise, they are not as main. So we are going to attack those. I'm talking the Free State, the Northwest, Eastern Cape, Western Cape, and Northern Cape. We are confident we'll address those because they account for less than 2% individually. So that's the point that we are making. And then we make the point that there's a three-pronged approach to the elimination of this. So I said the more pessimistic time period is 18 months, and we can do it much, much less. And our computation is that we can be able to do that in 12 months, eliminate load reduction once and for all, and give dignity to our people, including those who are in villages, far-flung areas, and those who are in informal settlement. I've made the point that we are addressing the issue of free basic electricity, what that quantum is, how it will look like. And then the second thing is to ensure that there has to be the rollout of smart meters. So what we have, one of the conditions to help us to accelerate this process is for us to be able to work with the domestic industry, those who are in the business of manufacturing of smart meters. For them to make these smart meters, of course, meeting our own standards. There are checks and balances, technical checks and balances that ESCOM will do. They already have about 600,000 with them now. As I speak to you, we'll start with those and then canvas industry to get more. So we think what this exercise will also do is to increase capacity utilization of the smart meter manufacturers in the country. And then the other thing that we are doing is a deployment of distributed electricity infrastructure. We will be taking you to Musina, where we went into a village that was never connected to electricity. That village now, as I speak to you, when we take you there, you'll get your own testimonials. You don't have to ask me. We have gone into that area, installed solar and battery for purposes of storage. We're electrifying everyone. And we go further, and for public spaces, they get free Wi-Fi, and then we also have an ambition of ensuring that everyone has got access to Wi-Fi. What that will do is a pilot phase. We think that we can peg electricity at a particular level. I will not share with you what that level is. We already have a number, so we'll use that site to justify, because science is important. What is this threshold? Below which we can afford to provide this. And I can tell you now, it's substantially less than what they are currently paying. And it is that model. You remember earlier on when I say we are going to revise the free basic electricity. When we do the hybrid of solar and wind, we think we can provide electricity far, far much cheaper than is currently the case. We are confident about that. And we are just going to show in relation to the two villages in Musina, and we will invite you to come and see it. So the rollout of distribution infrastructure, reticulated or localized generation, a distributed generation is a more opposite technical language. It's going to help us to connect people faster, and by faster I mean the following. Now, for us to connect a far remote village in Ramokgopa, we must build a transmission infrastructure. It is costly and it takes time, because in some instances, for you to put up the pylons, you go through a privately owned property. The farmer will insist that you are going to pay me this much. We think that we must pay you substantially less. We enter into discussions. There's an impasse. Then you go through process of expropriation. By that time, you find each other is 3 years later. But with distributed generation, we don't have to connect to the grid. We're going to generate closer to where the load is, where the source is. And in that way, we're able to do it faster. That's the point that we are making on this slide. What is this thing in numbers? Remember, I told you I'm going to pick on Gauteng. In Gauteng, there's 632,158 customers that are being load reduced. And of course, the feeders that support this 632,000 plus is about 604. And our projection is that by March of next year, we should have done 145. Like I said, it's a conservative number. If we get to be received by communities, we can do it faster. The nice thing about Gauteng is the density, is that everyone is located almost in one area in their numbers. So you don't have to have trucks all over the townships, so we can move from one block to the other, one house to the other, rolling out smart meter. But like I said, that's where we anticipate to find the most resistance. And that's why that number you'll see, we say in the next 8 months, we should be at 145. If you don't find that resistance, you could be double that number at about 300 or so. And that's a function of our engagement with those communities, because there's no substitute for engagement. Because communities have got their own agency, we need to engage with them. And our passage access to these communities is through the ward councillors. I've made the point, for an example, about Limpopo, 349, 127 of these 349,370 are affected, 78 feeders. And then we do make the point that in March of 26 next year, we would have halved this number. I'm confident with Limpopo that this is a conservative number. We can do substantially more than that. So that's why we do that for each and every province, and that's why we are showing. So the point I'm making is that there is science. We are very granular as engineers to know the number of customers, to know the number of meters by definition, and the resource requirements for us to be able to roll out this infrastructure. Remember, once we are able to capture this and roll out these smart meters, we are able to bring down the amount of debt. And I'm sure one of the logical questions to ask, how are you going to finance it? We'll find it from the ESCOM balance sheet, dedicate the resources there. But there's also a cost of not doing this. The cost of not doing this, that money that is owed to ESCOM collectively by municipalities and customers is over 100 billion, is going to grow. And I did share with you that it's growing by about 2 billion rands per month. So it's in our interest to stem the leakage, and that's what we have set for ourselves. So I do make the point. The first phase, we want to resolve about 291 feeders in all of those the provinces, and we are going to bring down these numbers. We are confident that the first phase, which will end by March 26, the other 5 provinces outside Gauteng, Limpopo, KZN, and Mpumalanga would have resolved the issues of load reduction. So we're confident we'd have done it, or significantly far. And then depending on the level of resistance, we should have eliminated the load reduction across the length and breadth of the country by March 2027. But our view is that we are confident we can do it much, much earlier. Like I said, it's a function of a community cooperation, and of course we'll invest a lot of resources in that engagement. So we map March 2026, and then that's the first phase from today to March 2026, and then the second phase is from March 2026 to September 2026, the third phase September 2026 to March 2027. Like I said, those numbers, those timelines can come back and allow us an opportunity to ensure that everyone is able to benefit from the democratic dividends of having access to electricity. I'm going to give you 2 typical examples of the levels of granularity. I've chosen KZN as a first example. So we know that in the municipality of Nongoma, in Ward number 7 and Ward number 8, accounting for 1,293 prepaid users, these users are subjected to load reduction. So we have gone to the level of the ward, of and then we know the number of customers, and we say we are going to start now in October 2025. By March 2026, we would have finished the Nongoma Ward number 7 and 8 load reduction there. And you can see that there's municipalities that are highly affected. Mbonambi and Msinga, they are the most highly affected by both the number of wards and also the number of customers. So now we know the science of going into an area that if we are to isolate Mbonambi and Msinga, and it's where you're starting, people are going to see the biggest difference. So if you are to go in the evenings and the mornings in those wards in Msinga and Mbonambi local municipalities, you'll see it's dark. They've got a different relationship to electricity than the rest of the country. So once we move in our numbers, we're going to leave the place lit and would have addressed the situation. The other example I am giving you is Limpopo. Remember, we're doing this for each and every province, and then we go to a municipality, and then we go to a ward, and then we go to the number of customers, and then we tell you when are we going to start. Limpopo, let me give you an example. Go to Tzaneen. It's very dark in the morning, it's very dark in the evening, because of the number of wards that are affected by load reduction. And we are saying Tzaneen, we are taking it now in October. And we are confident we have ended load reduction in Tzaneen by March of 2026. Again, like I said, is a function of that cooperation that I was speaking to. You can see the number of wards that are affected there in Tzaneen. It's almost all the municipalities in Tzaneen, the Greater Letaba, Greater Tzaneen, are affected by load reduction. So these areas, if I were to hold a meeting tomorrow and tell them that we're making significant strides in ending load shedding, they say, no, but Ramokgopa is talking a different language. Come here in the morning, in the evening. And that will not be a lie. They are in darkness in the morning and the evening, despite all the advances that we have made. So the point I'm making is that in the same manner that we orchestrated and delivered on load shedding, we are now resolving load reduction. I have confidence that we have set up 18 months, we'll do it substantially less period. And then I make the promise to the country again. I said to the country, we'll resolve the cost of electricity. I'll come back to you and show you how we're going to resolve it. We made a promise on load reduction, we are delivering. Load shedding, we have delivered. Load reduction, we will be delivering. Our actions and results will speak for us. We don't have to call a press conference to tell you that we are making strides. Go to Mbonambi, go to Msinga, go to Tzaneen early next year, and other municipalities that I have not mentioned. Ask them if they still have load reduction. They'll tell you that we don't know what you are talking about. Load reduction is done. And then we'll come to the cost of electricity. We are very methodical, we are very judicious, we are very calculated in the manner in which we're doing these things. I had said before, we can't do everything at a go. We are going to start somewhere. We started with load shedding. We are now on load reduction. We'll come back on reducing the cost of electricity. Thank you, TK.